welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres, and the Good Girl Confessional podcast is proudly brought to us by WB40, Women Beyond 40, a platform for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond. And you can join us at WB40.com. I would also like to shout out to the Alex the Seal podcast, which I'm very proudly a co-host of. You can check it out at all your favourite podcast apps. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we record this podcast. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Today in the podcast, I am very excited to be chatting to an incredibly interesting woman who has spent her life doing pretty amazing stuff. Her name is Jan Latta. Jan is in her 80s, and after decades having an extraordinary career in both advertising and publishing, she actually encountered a huge gorilla which would change the course of her life. Yes, I did say gorilla. Jan has gone on to become one of Australia's most prolific wildlife photographers, and it's taken her around the globe. She has written so many children's books, sharing her incredible images of endangered wildlife and educating kids on why these animals are so important to the world. Jan has recently written a memoir. It is called Doing It My Way, and boy, has she ever been doing it her way. Please welcome to the confessional, Jan Latta.
Hey there! When Sandy's not interviewing kick-ass women, she's hanging out with me at Alex the Seal, a podcast about music and nostalgia. I'm Jo Pybus, and each episode, Sandy and I talk about all the songs that got us hooked up, knocked up, and broken up. Do yourself a favour and search Alex the Seal on your podcast app. Love you, Molly.
Hello, Jan, and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
We've been having lots of fun with all of the tech this morning, but we're here. Everything is good. So welcome. First of all, I wanted to say congratulations on your book, which is fabulous. For those who are watching along on video, they'll be able to see this, but we will put all of the links to Jan's book in our show notes. Your incredible book is called Doing It My Way, and boy, are you ever. What an extraordinary career you have had.
I've been very lucky.
So tell us, first of all, I want to say that you had an extraordinary career, first of all, in publishing and advertising. So before we jump into what your true calling and passion was, tell us a little bit about that career.
Well, in advertising, I learned about the glass ceiling. I worked for a big international agency called Lintas, and it was divided into 4 groups, and we each had to come up with a creative solution. My idea was selected, but the managing director at the time said, "Great idea, Jan. I'll get one of the men to do it." And I realized the glass ceiling was a cement block at the time. But over the years, I usually managed to get my own way. There weren't very many women in advertising at the time, and from Lintas Sydney, I went to Lintas London, which I didn't enjoy at all. So I thought maybe I'll go to Canada before I come back to Sydney. And I had an interview with a man, and he said, "Oh my goodness, what do you do?" Because I had to tell him my salary. And he got quite angry, and he said, "You earn more money than me and my son put together. What do you do, draw?" And I said, "Well, I also think." I didn't get the visa. So that...
Oh, Jan, that is absolute gold. I love it. And, it's fascinating. And I think that's why I wanted to talk to you about that part of your career, because you're right. You were such a trailblazer, because in those times when you were working in that field, there were so few women who were A, working in advertising, but B, also making a real mark. And you did both of those things. So you're a pioneer. You led the way for so many other women now who are working in advertising.
Yes, well, I think I was just lucky in that department. But my husband was asked to go to Tokyo to open Y&R competitive agency in Hong Kong. In Japan. And I wasn't allowed to work in Japan. And it was the first time, my life was on standstill. But I learned plate etching, and it was wonderful seeing the linear line of the Japanese art. And then I was asked to go into a TV station called JCTV. And I thought, well, I've been directing commercials in advertising, that this will be fun. And they looked at the blonde with the boobs at the time and thought, no, she's going to be the hostess. So they asked me to host this TV program live. It was terrifying. And of course, I will I be interviewing? And they said, oh, you're going to find the people to interview. So Y&R got all their clients on the show the first time. And then I got into the swing of it and had fashion programs and food programs. And I think it knocked fear out of me for the rest of my life. And when I was publishing the Regent magazine, I often had to meet film stars and famous people. And I was quite relaxed about that because they were just really nice people. And I had some really lovely encounters with people like Pavarotti and Jeremy Irons and a few people like that.
How fantastic. And Jan, look, you are such an inspiration to me, because I publish an independent Australian magazine called WB40, Women Beyond 40, for women 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and beyond. And so, what you did in the sort of publishing world as well is quite fascinating to me. Again, at a time where you were trailblazing for other women. I mean, you're such a pioneer in so many fields. It's actually mind-blowing.
Well, when my husband, when Y&R asked my husband to go to Hong Kong and set up a new office there, I joined another competitive agency. And when a lot of my clients' agencies went over to Y&R, I was fired on the spot. First time I've ever been fired. And I thought, well, this is my life. What am I going to do? And then to make matters worse, after being fired, my husband announced that he really wanted to be gay. He wanted to live his life as a gay man. And I thought, well, if I leave the marriage, I've just been fired, so I have no job, I have no visa, I have no way to live, and I have no money. But I left the marriage, and I had 3 really poor, terrible years. But Hong Kong had a fascination about it, a vibrancy about it. And I thought I could go back to Sydney and be a highly paid creative director in advertising. But let's see what happens. Eventually, I got a job and a visa. I had this teeny little place to live in. And eventually, I knew the new Regent Hotel in Hong Kong wanted to have a magazine, and I pitched for that. And I had the right to publish it. I joined up with an editor and a production man, so we had a perfect trio for a magazine. And then we set about finding the advertising to afford to print the magazine. But this magazine went to every guest in every region around the world. And it was a great success. And that was followed by Mandarin magazine, And these were just terrific, wonderful, creative years. I traveled worldwide. Then the Hyatt Hotel asked me to travel all over Asia to do creative work for them. And it was just fantastic. And then I lost everything with a Chinese handover. Everything came down like a pack of cards. But I discovered Africa. And Africa is a sort of joy of my life now.
I am always really, doesn't matter how many people I speak to, how many women I have the honor to speak to on this podcast. I'm always blown away by the absolute true resilience of women. And I'm listening to your story to have, walked away from the marriage because in essence, you have no choice. And to, as you say, have to start again financially and in every other way, and then to rebuild yourself and then lose everything again due to the political dealings that are out of your control. So I guess, why do you think it is that women are so resilient? Before we jump into Africa, because I'm super excited about that, but I'm really interested in your views on why you think women are so resilient. What is it about us, do you think?
We're the mothers of the earth. I mean, I've never had children, but I think women are just so strong that, let's call them the mothers of the earth. I think they can sort of cope with everything much more than men can. There was a great quotation which during the interview I'll find on my screen, which describes women perfectly. A little bit of it was, give them food and they'll make a meal. Give them a home and they'll make a family, all that. But when I went back to Sydney with my tail between my legs and feeling very unhappy that I had lost all those years and I had to start all over again, I went around pitching myself for creative or magazine work, and I discovered a new word. You're overqualified, which meant I was too old. And okay. And then I just thought for a while, and I thought, I'm going to go back to Africa. And Kalaman, my friend who lived in Africa, organized for me to, when I met him the first time because of the magazine. But this time I went back to see the mountain gorillas in Rwanda. And this was a really dangerous time because the terrible war was just starting. I invited a friend because that's something I thought I shouldn't do alone. And when I had this emotional moment with this big silverback, and I don't know why it happened or how it happened, I always have the hairs on my arms go funny when I even talk about it. But after this, Silverback and I exchanged a look, which I wasn't allowed to do or supposed to do. And then the guide said there were only 600 mountain gorillas in the whole world. And I thought that was so sad. And when we came down the mountain, I thought, I've had experience in advertising. I've had experience in publishing. I'm going to start making books for children on endangered animals. And I don't want to use illustrations. I want to show the animal in the wild, in their natural habitat, and that meant I had to learn to be a wildlife photographer. Kalaman was a famous wildlife photographer, and I said, how do I go about this? And he said, don't go to a studio and learn photography. He said, you come back to Africa, you've got to learn in the wild. You've got to know everything about every animal you're going to see. You've got to know everything down to dung. He said, if you see wet dung, it's around the corner.
I love that.
I made a lot of mistakes, but with that one experience with the mountain gorillas, 16 books on endangered animals have been produced. Sometimes, people say, how did you become a writer? And I say, well, I was inspired by a mountain gorilla. But no, it's been so rewarding. Been so rewarding over the years. I've been traveling to Hong Kong every year to talk to school children, even during the riots. And then I usually go on to Shanghai and to Singapore. And this has been so rewarding, especially being allowed to talk about ivory and rhino horn. I have to be very careful with that one. But no, it's been a very rewarding time.
And what is the reaction from the children? Because, not only have you created these absolutely beautiful books and your photography is so extraordinary, but you, as you say, you've created these programs so you can go and actually talk to children so they learn at a young age about endangered species and why they're so important for our world.
And I even went back to Africa and I started making a video of each of the animals because children could then see them and hear them in the wild. Sometimes it was a bit of a rush. My last book was Sleepy the Sloth, and I had to go all the way to Mexico, which was really long trip. But I had 1 week to take all the photographs and a video and fly back again. But it was possible. Did all my homework before I.
Wow.
It's my happy book. I'm going to lean to the side. There's Sleepy the Sloth. And I took him to China. I would sit him in the taxi and lift him up and wave to children. I got some very funny reactions from that. But a lot of the trips.
Oh, that is so beautiful. So actually your career, like taking photographs and your passion for endangered species has taken you to around the world, but to so many extraordinary countries. So here's some of them that I'm going to read out. So you've got Borneo and Uganda and India and China and Sri Lanka, Costa Rica, 11 times it says here to Africa, extraordinary, Japan and the US. And of course here in Australia, which is fantastic as well. This is probably going to be a really tough question, but where was your favorite place? And if you could choose, what's your most favorite animal?
Oh, that's easy to answer. The Masai Mara and the cheetah. Because I'm packing, I would normally hold up the photograph of the cheetah. But no, I had this lovely encounter with the cheetahs, and it was very special. I think because I was quite calm and it was such a wonderful experience, the cheetahs sort of accepted me, which I feel was a great privilege. But again, that was Carl. We were walking in the bush and I was fiddling with my camera and I was I looked up and I saw this cheetah walking towards me and I thought, what did I do? And Carl just went, get down. And of course I knew I had to be calm. And the first time the cheetah just flopped in the grass nearby. When I went back the next time, I said, Carl, do you think we can find that cheetah? And we walked in this same sort of area, and I heard a cheetah before I saw it. And when it came out, it allowed me to put my hand on its throat to feel the vibration. Second cheetah came up, and it was just magic. Really the most magic moment of my life.
Wow. See, now I've got goosebumps just even hearing that story. I think so many of us have only sadly ever seen wildlife, in zoos or in confined spaces. And so, and I do understand that breeding programs are so important, but how extraordinary for you to have seen and, borne witness to these beautiful creatures out in the wild where they really should be.
Well, sometimes, I'll start it another way. When I first met Carl and Kathy in Africa, they had a cheetah called Moto, but I couldn't go anywhere near him. Carl said, "This is my cheetah." I used to try and crawl up and take a photograph, and he said, "No, don't do that." it was interesting that was my first encounter. But the second one, of course, was so much better in the wild. But sometimes it's very and after this terrifying experience, I managed to survive. My only thought was, gee, the boys are going to love this story when I tell it at school. But I was travel alone, and I was in a new camp. My tent had only just been put up before my arrival, and I was having dinner with the camp manager. We were in a big, long mess tent that had an opening in the middle, and we heard this crash and bang, and we both looked around, and a big lion was chasing a wildebeest right through the middle of our tent. I didn't know what to do. That was definitely a first for me. And the Maasai came running down once I was with them. You know, they knew how to look after me. And when everything settled down, the lion got its kill. I said to Rolf, the manager, how am I going to get back to my tent? And he said, oh, not a problem. 2 Maasai will walk with you. So I had these 2 great big Maasai warriors. I was trying to be invisible in the middle. And they started walking me to my tent, swinging the torches around, picking up some of the pride of the lion on the left. But one lion was just beyond my tent with its eyes glowing in the torchlight. And I grabbed hold of one of the Africans and I said, we can't keep walking. Look, it's too dangerous. And he said, it's okay, Jan. You are closer to the tent than the lion is. And the desire to run was intense, but they got me. And but in contrast to that, a few mornings after, I was going out with my guide in the early morning, and a lioness was quite a distance away. But she turned and looked at me, and for some reason, we locked eyes. And without losing eye contact, she started walking towards me. She walked right up to the jeep. She looked up at me. I looked down at her. She walked the length of the jeep and then into the bush. And my guide said, you didn't take a photograph. And I said, no. To have that eye contact with a lioness, a wild lioness, was just so special. So the contrast of the 2 experiences were rather interesting.
Wow, what an absolute gift. I will say for me, one of my most favorite animals in the world is the elephant. And I just love them so much, and it breaks my heart to know that obviously people are still trying to poach these beautiful creatures, for financial gain, as you say, for ivory, etc. I loved reading in the book that you've been across several elephants, and you've written a really lovely story about because they can be quite dangerous in the wild. I mean, they're huge creatures.
And if they're in must, even the guides are nervous because that's when they're feeling sexy and wanting to have a mate. But I had one outside my tent one night, and I wasn't sure what the noise was, so I lifted up the flap of my tent. And this big tusker was just munching away on the leaves of a bush near the tent. And I thought, should I be frightened? No, he's eating. So I went back to sleep again. But I've adopted 8 elephants at the David Sheldrick orphanage. So have a look at that. I've got the details in the back of the book because it's so rewarding to choose which little baby you want to adopt. It's only $50 US a year, and they do the most wonderful job. And one year I was there, and Angela Sheldrick allowed me a few privileges that she wouldn't to other people. And I had this little baby elephant, and she said, you can put your fingers into his mouth, but watch out for his little tusks that, are starting to come through. And he just sucked away on my fingers. I wasn't sure if I could pull them out. So, yeah.
Oh, Oh.
Horrible.
Oh, how beautiful. I think yeah, look, I've been up close and personal with a baby elephant. I was very lucky at a shelter, like at an animal sanctuary in Thailand. And I think for me that was just such a beautiful moment, because unfortunately, it had been, separated from its mother, or, the mother had died. And but yeah, it was absolutely beautiful. And just to see the care and the love
Yes.
that these carers, I don't want to call them keepers because they're not, but carers have for these majestic animals, but the respect that they show them is quite extraordinary. So that was a magical moment for me too. But wow, I never been very lucky. I haven't been lucky enough to see them out there in the wilds, though. That would be incredible.
Well, sometimes the really big tuskers, I mean, they're the size
Lovely. Hey.
of a double-decker bus. They're gigantic. And again, can you trust the guide that, who knows the elephant? Actually, I think I've written in the book about my first experience at Amboseli. And Cynthia Moss was researching all the groups, calling them A group and B group and C group. And my guide was very familiar with this particular group. And I had a really frightful experience with a big elephant charging me. And Letterloy, my guide, said, "Oh, don't worry, that's just Conrad, So he sort of diffused my terror at the time because he knew him. But no, elephants, I think, they're just so intelligent, and there's so much we don't know about them. And we still have a lot to learn.
Absolutely. I think was really interesting reading in the book, reading your story about the hippo, because we forget like how dangerous they are, and in fact they're one of the most dangerous animals in the world, aren't they?
Most dangerous animals in Africa. Not sure about the world, but in Africa you might think a lion or something. But
okay,
if you get between when they come out to eat in the early evening, if you get between them and the river, automatically they will attack, and they can run faster than a man. So they're vegetarians; they're not going to eat you, but those disgusting big jaws and their teeth clunk. So yes, one has to be very careful. I was in a little canoe on one of my and a fearless leader. There was just a camp with a few people in it, and we were going along a river back to camp. And there was a prod of hippos, and he said, "There may be a charge."
Well, I don't. I now I need to know though. Should you show fear? I don't. How could you not show fear? So, Jan, I wanted to ask you, because you touched on this before, and I think in reading your memoir, you have shared so much personal wisdom, which I really love. But one thing that you touched on before, which is something that we talk about a lot here at the Good Girl Confessional podcast, is about ageism and how women really come up against opposition as soon as we hit a certain age, right? I'm in my 50s, we called the platform Women Beyond 40 because for me, there's a real line in the sand from the moment women are in their 40s onwards. So you've had real life experience of ageism in the workplace. And I guess I would like to ask you, because our readers are going to be fascinated, on your views on that, and also that you've gone ahead regardless of age, and found your passion, and then really recreated yourself in a new career path, which you probably had never thought about earlier on.
Yeah.
So tell me your thoughts on that, on ageism, and how you think women can get past it.
Well, I've always felt age is just a number, and we should ignore that. I had my career in Africa and all that trouble when I was in my 50s. And in my 60s, and in my 60s and 70s, I was talking at schools. And thankfully, at 70, I didn't I pretended I was 60. But just recently, with all the new laws that have come in, you have to tell your age. And putting down 83, I think they're going to think it's a typo, or hopefully, because, it's a young generation. Maybe I should step aside in that area, but it's not going to stop me for anything else. As soon as this operation is over, my present to myself is going back to Africa, depending on COVID and all those things, because I'm going to be a photographer and an artist. There's no question about retirement for me. Yes, I think you should just do what you want to do, dress how you want to dress, just enjoy life as it comes along and take risks. Because even today, when a lot of things were going wrong, and I thought, from every bad thing that has happened to me, a good thing has followed. And if you have that mentality, even wallowing in how bad it is, thinking, well, it's going to be all right. And usually it is. And that's something I've always believed in. And I've been way down in the bottom of the well at times. I think it's devastating when a husband says he's gay. I think for a woman, first of all, you might blame yourself. Was I this enough or that enough? But you should never, ever do that, because men wanting to be gay is something that is a force of nature that we shouldn't interfere with. But being in Hong Kong and in the situation I was in, I'm afraid I had lots of wonderful love affairs, because one, it was proving that I was still an attractive woman. But two, I got over all those silly things that you think about at 3:00 in the morning.
Well, the thing is too, I mean, when people are born gay, that's who they are. I think a lot of people, they try very hard to fight against it, perhaps for a number of years, but in the end, that is our human nature. It is what it is. I think what's fascinating, though, is, as you say, you were faced with a life situation that you weren't expecting. How brilliant that you went and had lots of love affairs. I think it's fabulous. And I think for women, I mean, I certainly found in my 40s, I kind of started to just start figuring out who I really am without this kind of lens of what the world thought I should be. And in my 50s, I now care less about other people's opinions and views of me. I care about what do I think and what's right for me and what are my values. And I think that that's a powerful lesson for all women. And I loved reading your book, but I love talking to you because it's that wisdom. Chatting with you shows everyone listening to this or watching this that regardless of whether you're 50, 60, 70, or in your 80s, that you can continue to live your life with passion and joy.
When I was going through my difficult period after leaving the marriage, I went to see my favorite doctor. He was a Chinese doctor. And I was a blubbering wreck at times. And he said to me, okay, you're going through a tough patch. I'm not going to give you Valium. I'm not going to give you a sleeping pill. What you have to do now is go out and get laid. Feel like a woman. They're the good doctors.
Well, I love your doctor. Brilliant advice.
I meant to add that in earlier. But no,
look, as a woman who's been divorced as well, I think that that's really sage advice. And I do think that it's part of, I really, it was this thing of, well, I've got to figure out now who I am if I'm not part of that couple. And it was brilliant because I actually did find myself on so many levels.
Mm.
And I kind of had a bit of a sexual revelation, I think, that I kind of went, oh, there's a whole world of people out there. And I think, that's powerful and empowering for women, I think.
Yeah. And I was doing some book signing for my new book at Dimmicks. And it was just before Christmas, and a woman came and said, "Oh, my new book was there, but all my other children's books were there." And she said, "Oh, this is wonderful. My son will love this." And she said, "Let me go and ask my husband. He's playing Santa Claus, David Jones next door." And I thought, that is so sad that she could not buy something that was $15 for her child for Christmas without asking her husband. And I thought, oh, yeah, and that's a situation for a lot of women. They feel they have to ask permission.
Yeah.
I've never had.
You're 100% right. And I do think that I see the world is starting to change now, finally. I do think that, women are starting to understand that we need to kind of have our own financial independence. We need to have, we need to be, look, I feel, for me personally, you learn a lot in life. And one of the things I've learned is that, it's brilliant to have a man in your life if you want him there, but it can be quite damaging if you have him because you need him there.
Yeah.
There's a very big difference, I think.
Yes. Very wise.
Well, I always like to say that for women, it's hard-won wisdom, because nobody hands us our wisdom on a silver platter, Jan. We have to go out in the world and learn some tough lessons to find that wisdom, I think.
I had an experience in Hong Kong with a big company called Jardines, and I was asked to design all their collateral for a big anniversary. And I was dealing with a rather pompous Englishman, and our meetings were just so awkward. And I thought about it for a while, and I went out and I had a 3-piece striped man's suit made. And I went back in wearing the suit, umbrella, briefcase, posed myself in the doorway, and I said, "Peter, is it conference room 1 or 2 today?" His eyes were like, and he said, "Conference room 2. So he came in, sat next to me, and felt my jacket, and he said, "Who's your tailor?" And for some reason, I realized he had a sense of humor. And our meetings were fantastic after that. So a bit dramatic. I had to dress like a man to do it. But it worked. Whatever works, do it.
Oh, I love it. And I think, see, you're just such a trailblazer, because now, of course, there's lots of women wearing power suits, and I love it. I think it's, what do they call it? Unisex dressing. And I think it's brilliant, because I think fashion is another way in which, women can be empowered.
Yes.
To show our personality, to show who we really are, and to show that we mean business, right?
Well, it worked for me.
Oh, I love it. Jan, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the Good Girl Confessional today. Your brilliant book, Doing It My Way, is just lovely. It's humorous, it's serious, it's all the things. It's quite lovely. It's filled, you've put, shared some of your most beautiful photography in here, but also all of these incredible photographs of you throughout your career over the years, I think is just so brilliant. You are such an inspiring and incredible kick-ass woman.
Thank you. The difficult part of the book was condensing my life into 8 pages.
It's
but I wanted to put funny.
Yes, it's brilliant. I think you've done particularly well. Oh, yes, all the photographs. It's so lovely. It's like, yeah, it's just brilliant. So I don't know if people can see this, but so many amazing photographs in this book. Jan and I are both holding up photographs for those that are watching along, which is brilliant. But all these incredible photographs of animals. And as I said, I'm going to put up the links for your book where people can buy the book, but where they can follow you as well. Because you, as you say, it's not just your memoir. You have created some extraordinarily beautiful children's books. And I think how brilliant and how lucky we are to have you in this world fighting, for our animal rights and sharing your love of endangered species with the world. So hopefully you can teach us all valuable lessons.
Thank you so much.
It's been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much, Jan.
Thank you, Sandy. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.